Morning, brothers and sisters. In these Thursday's thoughts, we'll be looking at the fruits of the Spirit in Galatians 5 for the next few weeks. The focus, of course, will be on Galatians 5, verse 22. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. Taking the inaugural thoughts, we will look at love. When asked to look at this, my first thought was that I should be the last person to turn to for a treatise on love, especially in these times when I spend my days isolated in my home office. But I'm here alone out of love for my fellow man, and maybe that's all the more reason to think about how we exhibit love at a physical distance. Reading the whole chapter, I was struck rereading verse 14. For the whole law can be summed up in a single commandment, namely, you must love your neighbor as yourself. Putting this in context, I realized Paul's overarching message is to live by the Spirit rather than the law. But I still found this a useful touchstone in digging in to this subject matter. One, it's useful in getting the big idea or goal of the law. The legalities get us bogged down, and the focus on those legalities can distract from God's intent for the law. It's hard to remember and understand all the intricacies of the Mosaic law, but this simplifies it to the core. Two, even though we've heard this over and over again, it struck me afresh how operationally simple and useful this was. Love your neighbor as yourself. I have all kinds of problems trying to figure out what's good and how to treat others. And possibly I don't even understand how to treat myself that well. But even with my imperfect selfishness, this is something I can work with. I should treat my neighbor, all people, with the same love, concern, respect, care, reverence as I treat myself and my family. This reminds us of the view of the church as the body of Christ that we hear about in 1 Corinthians 12. It encourages us to think of my neighbor like my arm, not as some other who I might want to get ahead of and whose welfare I might ignore for my own, but as part of my own, and that's more important than ever today. Reading 1 Corinthians 12, 27 and 26. Now you are the body of Christ, and each of you is a member of it. If one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices with it. God gives us a vision and an intent that we are one people, dependent on each other, and who survive not by a zero-sum game of I win, you lose, but where we survive and thrive by caring for each other. It's hard not to have the pandemic on my mind these days. Thinking about my neighbors, the world as part of myself, as those I love as myself, is a very useful perspective to have in these times. I am physically distanced and masked because I don't want to endanger my neighbor, just as I want to minimize the risk to myself, because I love my neighbor as myself. This concern for neighbor is enough to keep us and help us understand how we should act and display love for each other. As I distance, I've been able to visit my sick mother, and it looks like out of the same love, I won't be able to see my family for the holidays. But we don't live in the first century, and physical presence is not necessary for presence. It's not necessary to connect and show concern and help others. As you no doubt know, I'm a technology optimist. I'm pleased that our advancing technology enables us to connect across miles and continents, so we can offer words of kindness and comfort and love to those we cannot see in person. And even selfishly, I can see how recognition and concern from others lifts my spirit and well-being, and I see that I can show love to others by reaching out over the wired and wireless links to my neighbors. And through these links, I also cannot help but hear about the divisions among my neighbors and the maltreatment of some of my neighbors by the others. This is not the vision that God has. If we love our neighbors, we will respect them, even if their current opinions don't match our own. My own opinions have varied and changed as I grow and I learn. And as I accept that in myself, as I accept that some of the opinions I once held no longer make sense, I should appreciate and forgive that in others. We're all on the journey. If we love our neighbors as ourselves, we'll want for them the same blessings and opportunities as we have for ourselves and our families. We won't tolerate bias against ourselves or our families, and nor should we tolerate bias against our neighbors who happen to have been born with different skin color, different gender, or in different geographic regions. Loving my neighbor as myself means I don't get an advantage by taking away the advantage of my neighbor. I want him or her to have the same opportunities and advantages that I wish for myself, just as I wish my left arm to get the same advantages as my right. I spend most of my time and attention on my work. So, how do I do my work with love? First, I do feel, done right, my work is one that makes the world better. It improves the life of my neighbors. Again, as a technology optimist, I'm excited about enabling automation, labor-saving devices that reduce drudgery, increase the health of individuals and their well-being, feed and entertain people, and allow them to connect with each other. At its height, my work is to improve the condition of all my neighbors. Working in education, my work is to bring useful knowledge to the world. In large, that's to help raise understanding and well-being of the world. In the small, it's to empower individuals to improve their status and their opportunities, and create and enable individuals that can in turn contribute to this larger goal of improving the lives of all of our neighbors. Working with an administrative role, I'm a gatekeeper for student curriculums. Showing love for my neighbor, my students, means working for what is best for my students, even when this is not necessarily what the student wants to hear at the moment or do at the moment, just as a parent shows love for their children. Nonetheless, it's useful to remember that the goal is love, not mindless rules and regulations. More broadly, loving my neighbor as myself means loving and wanting the same opportunities for all children as I would for those in my own extended family. The fruit of the Spirit is love. In our complicated world, we are bombarded with a multitude of concerns, and decisions are seldom simple. But it's a very simple thing to go back to. The fruit of the Spirit is love. Treat yourself, your family, the body of Christ, and your neighbors with love. If we get that right, we will fulfill the spirit of the Lord's commandment. In John 15:12, Jesus tells his disciples, "My commandment is this, to love one another as I have loved you." If we get that right, we make a better world in his image.